in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created.
And thou shalt renew the face of the earth.
Let us pray, O God, by the light of the Holy Spirit, this instruct the hearts of the faithful. Grant that by the gift of the same Spirit we may be truly wise, and ever rejoice in his constant.
Amen.
Saint Benedict and Saint Lawrence.
Pray for us.
Saint Alban, Roe, Blessed Nicholas, Postgrate, and Saint Thomas.
Pray for us.
Just a couple of things I've had prior to announce to you that next Monday, as you all know, the general chapter starts, and as I said before, the only issue that's going to affect us brethren is the order in choir, and it will be a considerable help in the production of a new order in choir. If those who are going to be absent next week, that's from Monday evening till Friday evening, we'll let Father Prior know it's a matter of urgency, then we can construct the new order for the choir. Because, as you know, like I said, the chapter father is very anxious to illustrate to the brethren of Ampleforth how the precedence works when a general chapter is in process. The second thing is, on the board you will see there is an extract photocopy from the Catalogus. Now, the important thing about that is it's there for you to check. The assumption is, if you don't put any mark by your name, that the entry is correct. So would you please just cast your eye on your entry and let Father Prior know if yours is incorrect. Fathers, it's a great pleasure to introduce Mohammed Al-Shomali again. Since he's been with us last, he's been to Rome, to the Vatican, and he tells me that there is a high-powered delegation from the Vatican led up by Cardinal Runzi, and certainly Bishop Michael Fitzgerald, who some of you may know as a White Father, who was a specialist in Islam. They are going to visit Iran in September, which is obviously a good move. But as all of us in religious life, whether we are in Islam or Christianity, sometimes decisions come out of the blue, and he now discovers that Cambridge, having offered him a place, the orders from Iran were that they wanted him to return back to the seminary. So he's going back to the seminary, having completed his work in the beginning of September, I think. So this is, in a sense, a farewell lecture to us, because originally we were hoping that he might stay on next year. He's going to talk about practical spirituality today, and take us into how practical spirituality works in Islam. Thank you very much.
Today we are going to have our third talk about Islam in general and Islamic spirituality in particular. And God willing, I am going to talk about some of the key concepts in Islamic spirituality, which to me seems to be very outstanding in all Islamic mysticism and spirituality, about poverty, love, and mystical knowledge of gnosis. And then, having finished that, I will talk about some practical advices, and there will be a handout to be taken. It's an extract from one of the books written by a very spiritual person in Iran, and it gives several instructions from different people. How do they advise those who are interested in spirituality to promote their spirituality? start, I thought it might be good to listen to one of the prayers from the book, which is translated in English as Songs of Islam, and then I will start my talk.
The whispered prayer of those who hold fast.
Do you hear?
In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the All-Compassionate. O Allah, O shelter of the shelter seekers. O refuge of the refuge seekers. O deliverer of the perishing. O preserver of the pitiful. O merciful towards the miserable. O responder to the distressed. O treasure of the utterly poor. O mender of the broken. O haven of the cut off. O helper of the abased. O granter of sanctuary to the fearful. O aider of the troubled. O fortress of the refugees. If I seek not refuge in thy might, in whom shall I seek refuge? If I seek not shelter in thy power, in whom shall I seek shelter? Sins have made me seek asylum in laying hold on the skirts of thy pardon. Offences have compelled me to beg the opening of the doors of thy forgiveness. Evil doing has summoned me to dismount in the courtyard of thy might. Fear of thy vengeance has prompted me to cling to the handhold of thy tenderness. It is not right for him who holds fast to thy cord to be abandoned, nor proper for him who seeks the sanctuary of thy might to be surrendered or disregarded.
I think this gives us some taste about some of the prayer. So I will start with the concept of poverty, but before that, I would like to remind you of something that I mentioned in the last session, that according to the Quran, the whole faith is a matter of submission and devotion to God. So if I don't mention submission or devotion as one of those key terms, it's because the whole issue is the issue of submission and devotion. And Islam itself means submission. So this is the religion of all the prophets, and all prophets preached and called for the same idea of submitting oneself to God. This shows itself in three aspects. One is to believe in the articles of faith, to believe in one God, to believe in the prophethood and the resurrection, all those things that we talked about in the first session. Then, in obedience to religious obligations, one cannot claim to be devoted unless he has fulfilled all the religious obligations and responsibilities. And the third is to improve one's character and to deepen one's sense of closeness to God and servitude through the mystical or spiritual journey. So the very last is the one that we are going to explore more. I will start with the notion of poverty, and I am very sorry that I will be very quick in my talk, but there is no other way. So I will just speak very shortly about these concepts. I think that there are 4 dimensions of poverty, or 4 different senses of poverty mentioned in Islam. And some of them are blamed and some of them are praised. The first can be introduced as inability or failure to earn money or produce some profit. So there are some people in the society that either are unable or they themselves are lazy and don't want to work. So Islam does not accept this situation of poverty as inability or as a failure to earn money and being dependent on the help or donations or other things. Islam promotes to earn money, to work, and work in Islam is very important. But the second issue, which sometimes they are misunderstood or confused, is that after you earn money, after you work hard, it's very much recommended not to keep what you have earned in your own possessions. Give it out to people, and you might have a person who has a very large amount of money receiving from your works or heritage or whatever, but at the same time you live very simply. And this is very important in Islam, to live very simply and to give out to the people. The third concept is that Islam in several passages, in many texts, introduces to human beings a new idea about poverty and richness, and says that the real richness and poverty is not in the economical aspect. The poor person is the one who would be lacking spiritual gifts. For example, once the Prophet Muhammad asked his companions, do you know who is the poorest people? They said, the one who has no gold, no treasure, no money. And he said, no. The one who would come on the day of judgment while he has done some services, he has done some religious obligations, but because he has oppressed some people, because he didn't observe the right of other people, so he would have suffering and he would have an empty hand on the day of judgment. So here we see that Islam wants to change our idea that the real poverty is the poverty that one has about the spiritual matter. It's not important to have lots of or billions of pounds or dollars when you are very poor in your spirituality. But the last one, which is the deepest one, is another sense again, another approach to poverty, which is very important and indeed is the ultimate end of the spirituality and mysticism. And that is to understand our total and entire dependence on God, and that we are nothing in ourselves. We are nothing except whatever God has given us and whatever God has willed. So the person who improves and strengthens this feeling through the spiritual journey, in the end of the day, will have no sense of I-ness, will have no sense of selfhood. And many Muslim mystics believe that it's possible that at the end of the spiritual journey, one will completely lose his selfhood, and he will no longer realize himself as something independent from God. So this is an issue which is very important, and there are many quotations about this matter, but I just want to give you some short introductions about the matter. And it's a very important issue in Islam, the issue of poverty in different aspects. The other concept that I'm going to introduce is the concept of love, which is very important, and hopefully very shortly my wife's book about love in Christianity and Islam will be published, and it's part of her dissertation. So you will see in the same book the Islamic view and the Christian view, how close they are to each other. Very shortly, I should say that according to Islam, love is the whole point in the creation. God created the world out of His love. And the divine love is first of all for Himself. It's a very beautiful discussion among Muslim philosophers and mystics, that God has the highest joy in Himself, because the joy and the love happens when you understand, when you apprehend that something is beautiful, something is good. If you have the maximum goodness and the best understanding, so you would have the maximum joy. And God has both. So the most joyful person in the world is God. And He has the highest love for Himself, and then through Himself for all creation. And it's because of His love for creatures that He has created them. And there are many beautiful discussions here. And of course, among all creatures, human beings have a special position, and according to the Quran, there are many verses that God says He has created the world, or He has created the earth and heaven for the sake of human beings. And among human beings, those who are the most perfect ones have a special position. So there are different degrees of God's love. He has love for all creatures, but He has a special love for human beings, and among human beings, He has very special love for the most perfect ones, such as prophets. And then we have human love, which is very important, and it is to reciprocate divine love for human beings. And there are many hadith, many traditions from the Prophet, in which he says the whole faith is to love for the sake of God and to hate for the sake of God. So if a person is really faithful, he should love whomever God loves, and he should hate enemies of God or enemies of human beings. And of course, I am very sorry that I cannot go very much into detail, just give you some very basic ideas, and God willing, you will read the book in the future. The last concept that I'm going to talk very shortly, and I think it's very important, is about the mystical knowledge or about gnosis. You know, we have different types of knowledge, different types of understanding. One type of understanding of God is the one that we find it through the theology or through the philosophy. So this type of knowledge is very general, is through some concepts, and it's not immediate. It's with the help of something which acts as a means we come to know God. But through spirituality, through mysticism, one is able to gain another type of understanding of God, another type of knowledge of God, which is much more influential and much more efficient. And that is to feel the presence of God without anything in between, like our own understanding of ourselves, which we call it the knowledge by presence. So our understanding of ourselves is not necessarily through some concepts. Of course, we can conceptualize that understanding, but not necessarily. So when we reflect about ourselves, or when we have our knowledge about our fear or our happiness or these things, we feel them without anything in between us. So Muslim mystics try to acquire such a knowledge of God without having anything in between. And this nearly happens to everybody at least once in his life. The Quran says about the people who are endangered, and when they are endangered, automatically they will think of a savior. They will think of God. But unfortunately, when they are saved, then many of them forget God. So we have this experience very much active in all of us, that when we are really in trouble and in danger, this type of direct understanding of God becomes very active in us. There are many beautiful sayings, and one of them that just I will give you some example is from the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad in his prayer of Arafat. Is the third Imam for Shia Muslim. He says that, "My Lord, I knew through the change of things and through the change of conditions and situations that you want me to know you in everything and not to ignore you in anything." You see, lots of things happen in our life, lots of changes. A mystic is the one who can find God beyond all these changes. If everything was stable, then we might think that it is natural. But a mystic finds through the changes the presence of God very much active. And he says that I find you in everything. Unfortunately, many people only find God when some miracles happens. For example, if someone has a cancer and then he is cured, said it was God that saved me. But when they are healthy, they don't feel that there is any need to God interference. But a mystic is the one who finds God in all moments of his life. And this is the type of knowledge that one has to find. He says that, when were you absent so that I needed to use a reason to argue for your existence? You never were absent. Who is looking for some reason to prove the existence of God? who feels that God is not present to him, so wants to prove it. So he said, you were never absent to me. And then he continues and says, what is more clear and more understandable than you, so that it can serve as a reason to come to know you? There is nothing more clear, nothing clearer than you. You are the most visible, the most understandable thing. And some other things that he mentioned. So this knowledge is very important. And there is a very beautiful saying from the first Imam Ali, who was the fourth Caliph. He says that I have never seen anything except that I have seen God before it and after it and with it. So I see God before every phenomenon and after it and during it. So always the presence of God and knowledge of God is there. Now let me have some short introduction about some practical instruction, and you will find them in the handout, and I would be very happy if you read them because they are very beautiful and very interesting, and they are given by the masters of the spirituality. I start with some things that usually are common in the spiritual advices. So I give a list of the things that they usually prescribe. First of all, it's very important that one tries not to commit any sin, to perform all religious duties. There are some people who think that when they are involved in spirituality or prayer or something like this, then it doesn't that much bother if they do some sins. But the great masters of spirituality say that no, it makes no benefit to such people. And they sometimes have very beautiful example. They say that there are some people who do lots of praying, lots of, for example, fasting, lots of pilgrimage, but they don't make any progress. Why? Because they are like that person who has a, for example, box and is every day putting something precious in his box. Some, for example, golden coin. But unfortunately, there is a hole inside the box. So whatever he puts in it, it goes down and drops. So he will gain nothing. So it's very important that first of all one becomes pious and commits no sins. This is the first important step. The second thing, of course, what I'm saying is not necessarily in order. Sometimes might be in order, sometimes might be. Is that one should try to always feel that he is being watched by God, should feel the presence of God. And Quran blames those people who neglect this fact that God is seeing them, God is watching them, and God is there. Many of human beings do not commit some wrong actions when there are some people. Even when there is a baby, they will not do some crime or something wrong, because they feel shy in front of that person to do something wrong. How can we do something wrong in the presence of God? It is very pity that we will feel shy to do something wrong against the baby, not in front of God. So we have to remember that always God is present, and all our actions and even whatever comes to our mind is being observed and watched by God. The third thing is that many of the mystics prescribe that during the day one has to have a special time, special moments for thinking about what he has done during the day. A type of review. And they call this muhasabah. So, for example, it might be before you go to sleep. You should review whatever you have done in the day and see that if you have done something wrong, so you should try to remedy. And if you have done something good, you should thank God and try to do it more. And it's very important. If we don't do this, if we don't keep track of our actions every day, so we will not make any progress. Because we will forget many things that we have done, we will not repent for them, and it will be very difficult. There is a similar concept which is different, and that is muraqabah. The first one comes after your action. So for example, in the end of the day, before you sleep, you have a review. But the second one, which is more difficult, is to have a type of self-care and self-control during the day. So you don't say anything, you don't do anything, unless that you have made sure that it is compatible and it fits in your model of spirituality. And this is very important concept, which is called in Arabic muraqabah, type of self-care. And another concept is musharatah, which means that every person can make some promises to himself. For example, if I feel that I am weak or I am lazy in some matters, for example, it's very difficult for me to get up early in the morning. So what I will do, I will make a promise to myself that if tomorrow I don't get up early, I will do such a difficult thing. For example, I will not eat my lunch, or I will, for example, pay such amount of money, whatever is difficult for me. And this helps in getting more determination to do those things. So this is also important concept. Another thing which is very important is silence. In Islamic spirituality, silence is very important. And there is a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad that if it were not it was not your talks and what comes to your mind, you would be able to visit angels and shake hands with them. But it is because of you talk a lot and you are not controlling what you are saying, so you have lost such an ability to visit the angels. And there are many hadiths about this. For example, another hadith says that a believer is observed and is recorded as a person who is doing good deeds unless he talks. It means that a silent believer is considered to be good. But when he talks, he might be good or bad. So silence is very important, and there are many hadiths which speaks about the importance of silence on improving one's spirituality. And also there are many hadiths that introduces tens of sins that can be done through our tongue. In some books they mention up to 70 sins that can be done through the tongue, like telling lies, like bothering people, like backbiting. Many things can be done through our tongue. And the last one that I mentioned is just a sample, that once the Prophet told people, be aware about what you acquire with your tongues. They said, what do we acquire with our tongues? And what would be the harm in it? And the Prophet said, the people will not get into fire with their face except through what they acquire through their tongues. It means that many people go into the hell. But those who go with their face down to the fire, I don't know how to translate it well in English, so I hope you get the concept, is just through what they have said. So this is very important aspect, and silence is very important. Of course, it doesn't mean that one shouldn't speak when one has the duty to speak. There are some occasions in which you must preach, you must speak. But what is important, that a person has to practice silence for a long time so that he will have control of his talk. So he will know when to talk and when not to talk. And there were some people who were doing something strange. Of course, this is not something recommended, but anyway, they were doing something strange. They were putting some stones in their mouth, so that whenever they wanted to talk, they needed some time to get it out of their mouth. So it gave them some chance to think about it. The other thing which is very important is not to eat and not to drink a lot. It's very bad to, according to Islamic text, to eat a lot. And it has very bad effect upon our spirit. And these people are very much blamed, those who eat a lot, especially those who eat meat a lot. It's not good to not to eat at all the meat, according to some hadith, but it's very bad to eat a lot, and it's better to have our stomach not very much busy with eating a lot. The other thing which is very important is to be always enjoying the ablution. You know, we have a special type of ablution that we make before the prayer. So before the prayer, daily prayer is obligatory. But we are recommended to have it all the day. And it's very important, it gives spirituality and light to the person to have always this ablution affecting him. The other thing is that one should have some invocation to remember God, what we call it in Arabic and Persian, dhikr. So there are certain names of God, certain attributes of God that are recommended to invoke and to recite during the day and in the night. And this is very important. And there are many things mentioned about this, many technicality about how to invoke these names of God. And some of them are to be done according to the direction or instruction of a master. So for example, he would say that for your own situation now, you should say this name of God this many times. It's like a medicine. So it's not that everybody can take every medicine. So they say that this is what you need at this time. But there are something which can be generally useful. I mentioned just some of these things that have been mentioned. For example, very famous is Allahu Akbar, which means God is the greatest, or La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but the only one God. Or for example, O self-existent, eternal, there is no God save thee. Or something which is very important is a special invocation that one of the prophets had. We call it Yunus. I unfortunately forgot what you tell it in English. The one was the fish was eaten swallowed by a fish. Yeah. Yes. In Arabic and Farsi we call it Yunus. So the Quran says that when he was there, he said, "May you be glorified. There is no God but you. I have been doing injustice to myself." The Quran says, we saved him after this, and in the same way we will save the believers. So this has instructed and inspired Muslims to have this type of remembrance of God and invocation that that prophet had. Because Quran said that we saved him, and in the same way we will save the believers. So may you be glorified. There is no God but you. I have been doing oppression or injustice to myself. The other thing which is recommended is to recite the Quran quite often. For example, to have a special amount of, for example, a special number of verses every day written, and also to reflect on them, something which is very much recommended. And the Quran blames those who do not reflect on divine verses. So it's good to recite, but it's much better to recite and also reflect on them. The other thing is to try to have the prayer of night, which is not an obligatory prayer, but which is very important for spirituality. As you remember, we told that the prayer of morning can be performed after the dawn, before sun rises. So after the dawn, before sun rises, which is very important time, and it's very bad according to Islamic text to sleep in this time. You will lose if you sleep in this time. But it's very much recommended to be awake before dawn. And some Sufis and some mystics say that those who sleep before dawn and don't wake up earlier than dawn to worship God and to pray God will never make any progress. And one of the great Muslim scholars says that when he was in Najaf at the beginning of his study, a great master put his hand on his back and said, if you want this world or hereafter, makes no difference. If you want any of them, you should have the prayer of night, type of prayer before the dawn. And we believe that it was obligatory for the Prophet, but for other Muslims it's not obligatory, but it's very much recommended. So this is very important to wake up before the dawn. So the other thing which has been recommended is to think and to reflect. Some hadith says that thinking for a while is better than worshipping without thinking and reflection for a year or sometimes for 70 years. So if someone just makes some worship and praying without thinking, without reflection, for 1 year is not as worthy as the one who is thinking. And in another hadith, Prophet praises one of his companions who was called Salman al-Farsi, that Abu Zar al-Ghafari, that most of his worship was to think. And thinking is very important. Thinking about what? Of course, thinking about what we are in need of thinking about it. Not thinking about, for example, the many of the news that are in the newspaper. Thinking about our creation, why we are created, and what should be our relation to God, what we have done, what we must do. These types of thinking and reflection is very important, and worshipping and praying without this is not that much useful. By saying this, I put an end to my talk, and there will be lots of things that you will see in the handout. I just gave a very short, brief introduction to the practical advices, and if you have some question, please put forward. Otherwise, I will just recite one of the advices given. But if you have questions, please put forward, because you might have also some questions left from the previous sessions, and this is our last one.
But could I just ask, when you look at the Christian form of prayer,
Yeah.
the use of the psalmody and the offices in our monastic tradition, do you say to yourself, well, in fact, there isn't a great deal of difference between the two? Or do you say, well, I couldn't quite go along with the Christian way because I don't think it's complete or as effective as our Islamic way? In other words, how do you come to Vespers, you pray Vespers with us, you come and stay with us, listen to our office, you've seen us, and when you evaluate that, do you say to yourself, gosh, we're very close in this area, or do you say that no, we're
My understanding is and feeling is that we are very close, but we have two types of praying. We have our daily prayer, which is obligatory one. It's like, for example, Eucharist for you. And we have other types of praying that during the day we can do every time with different languages, with different expressions. So these can be done through the Christian prayers, through, for example, the psalm or whatever thing that comes to the mind of the person. But those obligatory ones, of course, has to be done in the special format. Like, for example, Eucharist for you, that it cannot be done in another format. And even you cannot, for example, have it by, for example, the communion of, for example, an Anglican. So, just there are some formal aspects, but in a sense, we are saying the same thing to God, and we are asking the same thing from God. If God just might be a matter of difference between the depths of the people. So there might be a Muslim who has less depths in prayer than a Christian, or vice versa. It's not that much because of the, for example, to say necessarily because of religions. It might be depths of the people that lack. So I feel very much the same when I am here listening to your prayer. Of course, the English ones that I understand.
Was it significant that the singing at the beginning was by a woman? Women priests are a live issue in some parts.
No, they are not priests, just ordinary people, lay people. And we don't like that women sing, even men singing, we don't like. But I mean, type of things that is used in the pubs or clubs. But for the religious types of singing, like this, we don't call this singing in our language. So these are quite acceptable. And actually, this is a religious, product that has been done recently. Of course, it's not yet in the market. But there is no harm in it. But if, for example, a lady comes and sings, some song about, this human love for each other, or these, things, this is not acceptable.
When you say not acceptable, what do you precisely mean? You mean it's not prayer?
No, we mean that it's not allowed.
Oh, not in the...
Yeah, like these music stars, many of these stuff, which, according to Islamic jurists, if they are those things that make you neglect God and put you into a special emotional feeling that you will not remember God, this is not allowed. And for this reason, we don't encourage very much usage of instrumental musics Because in most of the cases, people use this for not religious purposes. If they use it for religious purposes, it's okay. But if they use it for just type of things that happen in the dancing sessions, and in these pubs or these things, these are not allowed. But we believe, for example, that David had very beautiful voice. And of course, he was not like a star when he sang these things.
Well, Francis.
You said that God is beautiful, and we love what is beautiful, and He made His creation which is beautiful, and we can love that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't music, painting, and literature and art fall into that category?
So music in itself is not bad. This is why I thought that we can use music, but that type of music, which is used to just put you into emotional feeling, that then sometimes you will like to suicide. There are some types of music that when you listen, then you will be bored with your life. Or for example, with you make you very much, for example, in sexual feeling. Those types of music or songs are not allowed. But music in itself is very good. And even Avicenna has a beautiful saying. He says that one of the things that help us in making ourselves concentrated on spirituality is to listen to the beautiful voices and good music. But just we have to distinguish between different types.
Father William.
Mohammed, I'd like to ask a question in two different ways, just to try to remove any bias. And it's this, that from you were at pains to point out that we worship the same God, and I'm sure that is true. So from your knowledge of these two religions, would you say that the God that Islam worships is most akin to the Father or to the Spirit of Christianity, or to the Trinity? Or to put it from a Muslim perspective, are Christians most like Muslims in their worship when they're praying to one of the persons of the Trinity, such as the Father or the Spirit, as we did at the beginning of this meeting, or to the Trinity itself? And I think it's, if we do worship the same God as we do, then I think that's a question that you can ask. I just wonder what your answer to that would be.
Yeah, God is the same. But of course, our conception might vary. Not between Muslim and Christian, even among people of the same faith. The type of understanding that, for example, one of the saints have about God would be very much different from the type of understanding and conception that ordinary Christian might have. So, God is the same, and this is very important, and I always emphasize that even if Muslims say, for example, Allah, this doesn't mean that it's different from God. It's just a matter of linguistics. And in Arabic translations of the Bible, they use Allah. They don't use God. They use Allah. So God is the same. Our conception is different. But the other point is that, as I mentioned in the first lecture, God in Islam is considered to be very much transcendental. So you very, very rarely find something personal or human being attributed to God. Like, for example, as Father, or for example, as sometimes, for example, that in Christianity they speak about, for example, the idea of bride, bridegroom. Something like this you will very, very rarely, if at all, find. And
so, are you happiest when would you therefore say that perhaps it's more akin when we're praying to the Spirit, as we did at the beginning of this meeting, rather than to the Father, which is quite, perhaps from the Islamic point of view, quite.
Of course, when you pray to God, the Father would be very much understandable for you. But for example, when you say about the spirit or the sun, for our understanding is these are creatures of God, not God himself. These are things that are created by God, and they are very dear to us, of course very important to us, but we have, we both are believers in monotheistic religion, but there's a difference here between these two types of monotheism. But I quite understand what you are doing. It's not something, dark.
Father Chan.
Do Muslims ever pray with beads?
Rosary.
Yeah, is there a thing?
Yeah.
What sort of prayer is that?
There are different things, invocations that you do. For example, after each daily prayer, we are recommended to use our rosary. Our rosaries have 99 seats, and so we say 34 times, God is the greatest. So we use a 33 section with one in middle. And then 33 times we say, all praise belongs to God. And then 33 times we say, may God be glorified. And this is very much recommended to say. But you can use it for other things. For example, we are also recommended to ask forgiveness from God 70 times a day. So we can use rosary to say 70 times to ask forgiveness from God. And our prophet said that he himself is doing the same thing every day. And he said that, of course, he didn't make sins, because Muslims believe that all prophets were infallible. But he said that a type of smoke, a type of darkness appears to the heart. And I recite and invoke 70 times this special invocation to enlighten again my heart. Because we believe that for the prophets, their engagement in the materialistic world was very difficult. Because they were so high in spirituality that when they were involved in this materialistic world, of course for the sake of God, but this was very difficult for them, and they would feel that there is a type of darkness. So they had different types of experiences. If they were not asked by God to go and preach people, perhaps they would prefer to just be with God and worship God. Anyway, this is one of the things that 70 times we ask forgiveness from God, and other things. One of the things that you will find in the handout is that some masters say, before you go to sleep, prostrate, have long prostration. Prostration is very important. And then say that invocation that may you be glorified, there is no God but you, I have been doing wrong to myself. They say to say this 100 times, some say 1,000, depending on the people.
You do that in your bedroom, or do you do it?
Yeah, when they want to go to sleep. It's obligatory.
No.
These are things for those who want to promote their spirituality.
And I'm mindful of the time. Just coming up to 10 to 7. Could I just say a very profound thank you for that wonderful exposition. Certainly, I think it's given all of us a lot to think about, and an insight into the prayer and mystical life, contemplative prayer as we would call it, of your tradition, and how much of it links into ours. I think you will have seen from the questions that you engaged, touched an interesting spot, or an interested spot in each of our hearts. Not quite sure that we'll be lying prostrate, reciting 1,000 times before we go to sleep tonight. But at least you planted the seed. And some of us may, who've got the intention to bring the sense of the presence of God, the sense of living in the presence of God, which is so much part of the rule of St. Benedict, it brought it alive for us. So I would like to thank you very much indeed. You told me you were off immediately after Vespers, so I think all of us here would want to wish you a very happy journey, and thank you very, very much for coming here to make these three wonderful lectures. And we wish you all the best back in Iran with your wife, and we hope that the book is a big success. Thank you very much. And the sheets of there.
Yeah. I also would like to thank all of the dear audience and the Abbot, especially for listening to me and giving this chance to me to talk. And I really feel, without any exaggeration, that we are very close, and I personally have spent lots of my time in the last 2 years, especially, in promoting this type of understanding and promotion. And I quite feel at home when I'm here, or for example, just a few days ago I was in Italy, in Vatican, or I went to Assisi, and saw different types of orders. And I quite had a joyful time, because I feel that we are all people of the same God, and we have the same mission, and might be differences, which is not that much making trouble for us, as might be different among different orders in the same religion. So we ask God to help us to strengthen this friendship and this brotherhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you say a short last words for you? When you next come back to the